My name is Ben Espinosa. I'm joined here with my fabulous colleague, Brenda Slaughter-Reynolds. Brenda and I work in the Grants Administration Division, the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, and we are here today to talk about our cultural grant program. We're going to spend the next 90 minutes, and we've done this a couple of times now. We get pretty close to that 90 minutes, even exceeding it a little bit. So brace ourselves for a little bit of an in-depth conversation about our grant program. We'll spend the first portion of the presentation going over the program itself, a little bit about what we fund, who we fund, what are our particular priorities, the intricacies of the program. And then we'll shift gears midway to do a deep dive into the application process itself by doing an in-depth discussion of the application on SurveyMonkey Apply, which is our online application platform. We'll pause in the middle to address questions. And as well, any questions that we receive through the chat feature throughout, we'll address in opportune times during the presentation. Before I pass it on to Brenda to the first portion of the presentation, a little bit of framing I'd like everyone to think about. In the preparation of the application that's due on August 31st, we're asking folks to forecast into the future. We're asking folks to think about free and low-cost public arts activities to take place somewhere in between July year 2021 and to June 2022. So we're asking folks to be very optimistic. We're all collectively crossing our fingers with hopes that physical gatherings can safely resume by then, that we can all experience the arts in the way that we are accustomed to. That being said, as we ask you to think about what those projects in person can look like, we're encouraging projects that can lend themselves to transitioning into online experiences, just in case. That's the additional added challenge in the preparation of applications that you're going to be submitting by our deadline this year. Okay, so think of that, have that in the back of your mind as we jump in to talk about the cultural grant program. Brenda, off to you.
Thanks so much, Ben. I'd like to also say welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here today. As Ben discussed, during the first part of this webinar, I'll be going over the program components, and then Ben will be going step by step on the application itself. First, I'd just like to go over a little bit of history of the Department of Cultural Affairs. Formed in 1925, the Department of Cultural Affairs promotes arts and culture as a way to ignite powerful dialogue, engage LA's residents and visitors, and ensure LA's varied cultures are recognized, acknowledged, and experienced. DCA grants approximately $3.3 million annually to approximately 300 artists and nonprofit organizations, excuse me. The department also provides arts and cultural programming in its numerous neighborhood art centers and theaters and creates several arts and education programs for young people. Let's go over a little bit of the program eligibility. First off, I'd like to let you know this program does not allow for fiscal sponsorship. Each organization needs to be its own nonprofit. It has to be a nonprofit 501c3 organization with a primary purpose to provide arts and cultural services. Charitable organizations such as a 501c6 can partner with arts experts to present an outdoor festival or parade. All of the organizations need to be headquartered in Los Angeles County. The services must take place within the city of Los Angeles. That means the projects you're going to present must take place within the city limits. These are program grants, not season grants. We're not an operational funder. These are reimbursable one-to-one matching grants to make your project bigger, stronger, or faster. They need to have at least 1 year of prior experience with the project for your organization, and your organization should propose with LA support to make this project bigger, stronger, or faster. Again, this is not for a seasons of concert. This would be for a concert. We also, on the eligibility end, would like to have the ability to provide existing metrics on the project and audiences recently served. So with your at least 1 year track record of the project, we would like to see the metrics on who it served and how it was served to the audience. Project-specific qualifications are for grants to fulfill very specific needs, such as arts education. The specific qualification there would be a curriculum. The culminating performance must take place outside of the school day, or if this is a festival, it must take place outside on a city street or corridor. Okay. And next up, we're going to talk a little bit about our updates to the program this year. We've had a platform update, and Fluid Review was purchased by SurveyMonkey. It is now called SurveyMonkey Apply, has a new look and feel, similar questions and requirements. And if you had a Fluid Review account, you should be able to log in through SurveyMonkey Apply. This year, we want to let you all know there will be no host venue form required at the application stage. However, should your application be funded, it will be required at the contracting stage. Another update to let you know about is our operating category. This will now be for current grantees only, and this is now our administrative empowerment grant, and it will be done through a separate application. It is no longer involved with the cultural grant program. This is for small and mid-sized DCA grantees whose workforce represents the kind of gender, racial, and social equity promised by their missions and programs. And as I said, it is no longer part of the CGP. It is a separate application now. Look for that to be posted on our website in the September-October timeframe. And if you'd like to look at some of the draft guidelines, they're on our website now for your review. I would like to make one more note on the host venue form. While we are not requiring it for the application, the council districts that you select will be the intended council districts you will produce your work in. So you will need host venue forms from within those council districts at contracting. Now I'd like to go over some different elements of our program. We have different proposal categories. By and large, the vast majority of our proposals are for artistic projects. We get an overwhelming number of festival parade applications as well. And so let's go over the artistic project just a bit. This is to support the production or presentation of one or more public projects wherein professional artists, arts instructors, or arts business mentors are engaged to perform roles which are commensurate with the skills, talents, and status described in their resumes and biographies. You'll see when Ben goes over the application itself, you will have project participants. You'll have a place to put their name in their bio. And this is where you should really shine and be boastful. This is not a time to cut their bios down. We want to know the expertise of these artists. In addition, if your project is something that happens on a cycle and perhaps it's not going to be done in an upcoming, you don't have the most recent year of this project, we would like you to reach back to the previous project participants so that we can judge at least the artistic quality of the participants in the project. We want to know who's involved and what they're doing in the project. For our outdoor festival parade category, this is an outdoor event, always outside. It never takes place inside. And it takes place at a single public site over one day, and it exclusively supports an outdoor event that will take place in a single public site, such as a public street, set of adjacent streets, set of sidewalks, a public park, or a public plaza over one day or one weekend. And in our festival outdoor parade category, we generally get projects that are annual, seasonal, quarterly, or monthly. And they also include things like art walks. Let's go over some more categories. Very specific requirements in these categories. Our arts education category involves sequential learning aligned with youth arts education activities. And these often take place during the school day. And they must culminate with one community event taking place outside of school hours. So these proposals must be accompanied by a curriculum and 2 sample lesson plans that demonstrate the deep learning conveyed in a single session or a set of sessions. So what this means is when you're filling out your application, you'll come to a category called supplemental materials, and this is where your arts education category will upload the curriculum and the sample lesson plans. Okay, another unique proposal category for us is the business education arts advocacy category. And this is to support your business training, business association networking, field-specific conferences, and arts industry advocacy, wherein artists and arts managers are learning rather than performing. So our applicants in this category do themselves not present the artistic projects to the public. Instead, this category is for people and organizations who coordinate field building activities in forums.
Brenda, we have a question regarding the arts education category. The question is whether or not folks can apply for an after-school arts education program, or does it have to take place in school?
Well, it often takes place during school hours. This sounds like a question that we should probably get more information on before we give an answer. So, you know, if there's a curriculum, if it's aligned with youth arts education, if it culminates with an event that demonstrates the deep learning, those are things to be considered for arts education. If it's an after-school, performing arts program culminating in a performance, may or may not align with art standards. So we really need to take a deeper dive, and they can email us after the webinar and we can discuss further with them which is the best category, artistic or arts education.
I'll add a little bit to that. If think about as well as who would be participating in an after-school arts education program. If it's exclusive only to the students enrolled in the school where it's taking place? If it's standards aligned, youth age appropriate with a clearly defined scope and sequence, it might very well be an arts education project.
Yes.
In contrast, if it's an after-school program that's open to a variety of participants, youth enrolled in the school, or the other general members of the community, that's less rigorous and more around, it may kind of cross the line to recreational art making, skill building, maybe that's an artistic project. So think about what your program entails, who your intended audience is, the extent of rigor before you decide if it's an arts education project or an artistic project. Something to emphasize as well in the arts education category, whether or not the skill building activities take place during school hours or after school, we are also interested very much so in the culminating presentation to which the general public and community is invited to. Things taking place during a school day is not something we consider as a public event. That's why if you are in the arts education category, it's important to develop a proposal that elevates the culminating presentation to which who may not have a child enrolled in the school, can drive up to and attend as well.
That's not only for arts education, but any projects taking place in school must have an after-school hours culminating event. That's
right. A great example of that, Brenda, might be a drop-in once or twice kind of presentation by, let's say, a chamber orchestra. They come in and do an assembly in the school during school hours for the youth. That's terrific, but important to include in such a proposal as well is something that takes place in the weekend or in the evening where the general public can easily attend as well.
Yes, and just to reiterate, assemblies are not arts education category.
Okay. Brenda, I got as well as a new question coming in. This is someone with a project that involves dance performances performed at a park with community education component. Is this a festival? Or is it something, it's a project they also started this year but could not perform it because of the pandemic. So there's two questions here. A dance performance with a community education component, is that a festival? Question one. Question two, it sounds like it was a brand new initiative they wanted to roll out this year, but unfortunately were unable to because of the pandemic. Is it eligible?
Right, that's sort of a compound question in these times. We do require that the project have some track record. So if there's no track record of performance, it would be considered new, I believe, Ben, yes?
I agree. Because of that circumstance, we are unable to meet that 1 year of having performed it or having executed the project already. So because of that inability to show prior photos and video of the project taking place, being able to report the engagement numbers and metrics and being able to tell a story of impact, it won't lend itself well for our grant program this time around. Our hope is that you'd be able to carry out some version of that initiative between now and perhaps next year, and then come back and present that as a potential project.
Yes.
One more question, Brenda.
Okay.
This is a question regarding a small community nonprofit hoping to apply for an annual family festival that will include performances, arts and crafts workshops, and other elements. involving collaborations with young adult performing artists in South Central. Do the artists need to have a nonprofit org in order to be a collaborator?
I would be curious to know what kind of organization it is, if it's a theater company or if it's a group of people who do this on a regular basis on a more casual level. If it is a professional arts performing organization, I would want to know why they're not a nonprofit. For the festival category, the lead applicant may be a 501c6 charitable organization without an arts mission. However, they must align themselves with the arts. I'll go back to that category here.
I can add a bit to this as well. As Brenda mentioned, if assuming this question is coming from a person whose organization is not an arts-focused nonprofit, the outdoor festival would be the category to apply in. That's okay. Your challenge in this role is to showcase your ability as the lead producer of an event, and to showcase your community partners who would essentially curate the arts and cultural elements of your event. The answer is no, they need not be nonprofit collaborators. These could be independent artists. It could be commercial organizations that you have a working history with in producing an event. Your role in such a project is to showcase your ability to produce it and to showcase the talents that would be involved, including your collaborating partners, agencies, and the various artists who would be showcased in the event itself.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Okay, great. All right, so we've gone over some proposal categories. Now let's go over our submission cycle. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this page because I know it can become very confusing. We are in an even year application deadline. That means this is all performing arts and all other categories with their performing arts focus, save the business ed category. So for this year, we have dance, music, theater, multidisciplinary, outdoor festival parades, and arts education. And the reason for this is twofold. It relieves you of the burden of applying every single year. It also allows for us to convene the most expert panels for each discipline. We would not be able to convene all these panels this year were it not for this cycle. This year, dance applications will be scored by dance experts. This is for dance concerts and/or classes. These are dance projects wherein you're going to perform a Day of the Woman dance. You're going to instruct new dancers on a certain dance form over a period of weeks, etc. The music category will be scored by music experts. These will be for music concerts, and/or classes. These could be music instruction classes, which would then move to the arts education category. Theater will be judged by the theater experts. These are for theatrical plays, theatrical workshops, playwriting workshops, acting workshops for a specific style of acting, and the like. Multidisciplinary is for variety art series or workshops, and the multidisciplinary category is reserved to new artistic expressions involving multidisciplines. Dance, theater, music, all done new artistic practice as a presentation. Your outdoor festival parade category is going to be scored by a panel of experts in performing arts and outdoor festival parade production. The arts education category will be a panel of experts with arts education experience, most notably in curriculum, VAPA standards, and understanding how that fits into the school day with performing arts practice. Odd year application deadlines may also apply in this year. The difference is you will not be scored by a panel of like-minded experts. You will be scored by a panel of mixed experts. For instance, business ed, arts advocacy may also have an arts education expert, which may not be as well familiar with the educational forums for the field. Design visual artists, welcome to apply this year. And this is be for exhibitions and or education programs in design visual art, scored by a panel of mixed experts. Literary arts, including any literary events, poetry readings and the like, and or publications, whether they be online or in person, to be delivered. These will also be welcome this year, scored by a panel of mixed experts. If you have a film festival, you're welcome to apply this year. These go in our media arts category and not in our festival category. And this is for any film festival, media presentation, or public television program. Likewise, with traditional and folk art, any cultural heritage programs, welcome to apply this year. Outdoor festival parade, again, with a non-performing arts focus, and as well as arts education with a non-performing arts focus. These are all welcome applications this year. They will not be eligible for a score carryover, meaning 2 one-year contracts. They will be eligible this year for 1 year of funding should they be scored accordingly. They would then need to reapply the following August next year to get what we call on cycle in order to receive 2 one-year contracts. Do we have any questions about this?
Nothing at the moment about our 2-year application cycle.
All
let's
right.
give it a second to settle in, though. In the meantime, we do have a question around project category.
Okay.
This is an organization asking to fund a 2 to 3 concert cycle of new project material. So it's a brand new material never performed before. So they can't provide metrics for that specific content, but they can provide information and metrics for previous concert cycles. Is that allowable?
Well, I would say that if this organization is in the business of producing new content and new musical performances, and they have a history of doing that, that would be perfectly fine for this new material to not have been done before, because their history is creating new material. And second, I would say that if they're asking to fund 3 concerts, that those concerts span no more than 6 months. Given these grants are reimbursable funds and we have a 1-year cycle, we really do like to concentrate and have you concentrate on proposing things that take place within a 6-month time period to allow for reimbursement and for the grant cycle.
That's great. Thanks, Brenda.
Okay.
No questions around the 2-year application cycle, so I think we can move on. I will just add quickly, the takeaway from this slide is it answers a question: am I applying this year on cycle or off cycle? If you have a fantastic eligible project, performing arts or otherwise, submit it, and then the question remains whether or not we'll ask you to submit again next year. If you're a performing arts organization, great. You're on cycle. If you're a non-performing arts organization with a non-performing arts project, you're submitting an off-cycle year for your art form. So we'll ask you to submit again next year.
Yes. Thanks, Ben. Correct. Shall I move on?
One more eligibility, project category eligibility question.
Okay.
This is an organization with an exhibition set to open in summer 21 that they've been working on since 19. And it includes an education program for the public. This is the first time they're doing their education program. Is that okay for a design visual arts application?
If this design visual arts exhibit is something the organization has done before, not the specific exhibit, but if the organization is in the practice of producing exhibitions, then yes, I would say that's fine, because this grant is going to add on to what they've been doing. So that fits in with our bigger, faster, stronger. Yeah. So that addition would be fine. If they were merely proposing the educational programs, I would shy away from that, because that would be the solitary new item.
That's exactly it. In this instance, I would It's important to pitch your project as the exhibition itself, for which you have prior metrics to report on, and your argument for bigger, faster, stronger is an expanded education component.
Yes. Great. All right. Now we will go into the Department of Cultural Affairs priorities for this program. Our priorities are to provide free and low-cost and/or low-cost activities, I should say, and events open to the public. So by free and low cost, what we're using is the cost of a movie ticket. Most people are accustomed to going to the movies for arts and entertainment, and that is the benchmark we use. We try to keep the low cost per head to average out the cost of the movie ticket on the audience end. We do not like to see organizations raising ticket prices to cover costs. We like to see creative and inventive ways the organization overcomes the cost of doing business these days. Priority also is for activities and events taking place in arts underserved council districts. As you all know, Los Angeles is made up of 15 council districts. Department of Cultural Affairs has identified these council districts as overserved, moderately served, or underserved. We like to concentrate on the underserved, and we award geographic scores accordingly. I'd like to go over with you just those council districts. So for the overserved council districts, where we have a plethora of arts programming, Council Districts 1, 4, 13, and 14. The council districts that are moderately served are council districts 3, 5, 10, 11, and 15. The council districts that are most underserved are council districts 6, 7, 8, 9, and 12. This is also available on our website as information with further detail on the activities and events in each council district. We also prioritize and really enjoy projects that have a capacity enrollment and attendance that serves their constituencies. This pertains especially to groups that provide services in more than one council district. We do prefer that you have capacity enrollment and you know your audience, you know the community of that different council district. We also prioritize projects that develop jobs for artists and creative workers. We understand that arts administrators are pretty important. We understand that artists are pretty important. We consider all creative jobs when we look at your jobs for artists and creative workers. Okay, moving on from priorities. We have a very important part of your application, and that is your SMU Data Arts report. We are requiring 2 years of data art profile, and we really enjoy that you have 3 or more. And to get a data art profile, it is your fiscal year that you're reporting on. So we prefer a minimum of 2 fiscal years in your report. If you haven't done this, I highly recommend starting to enter your most recent data now. It's a very important report for us, and we look at the total revenue less in kind against what you've written in for your maximum allowable request, and we match it up. We will use a cultural data profile for your grant request should you not have an accurate number in your ask. We understand everything has changed the past few months and that financial numbers are not going to look as they normally do. That is what we want to know. We want to know how accurate your reporting has been during this time period. So out-of-date reports are really frowned upon this year. This is going to be a very competitive year. And so older reports with unexplained variances may lead to deductions in your administrative capacity category. And if your fiscal year concluded more than 10 months ago, we ask that you show your fiscal year in your data arts profile. This is a terribly important document, and all the information you enter here not only helps us accurately show the panel your financials, but it also helps the whole arts community understand where the financial dips and highs are for the whole arts community. So please, if you have any questions about this, this is run from a separate office from ours. It's on our website. You can go look up SMU Data Arts within the information on the application instructions, and it will give you contact information for Data Arts. I highly, highly recommend that you do your current year first and move back from there. Any questions on Data Arts?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions, Brenda. So let's do the first one. The first one applies to smaller organizations who have the option to fill out what's called an abbreviated survey on SMU Data Arts. Will that be sufficient for such organizations?
I would say that's the guideline. However, more information will make your application more competitive.
Yeah, I believe it's the bare minimum to produce a DCA funder report. So if that option is available to your organization, it's okay to pursue that option. Brenda, could you add some clarification on what counts as most recent and is expected to be provided? Is fiscal 20 required for everybody, or fiscal 19 okay?
I can't say blanket fiscal 19 is okay because everybody has a different end to their fiscal year. I will say, as written in our guidelines, if your fiscal ended more than 10 months ago, you should include this year.
That's right. It depends when everyone's fiscal year ends. So yeah. Let's assume your fiscal year 20 just finished up in June 30th, like ours, like the city of LA's. We hope that you can get your numbers in time, your fiscal 20 numbers in time. If you absolutely can't, we will accept a fiscal 19 in that case. And if your fiscal year ended, if your most recently completed fiscal year is in 19, like it ended in December, we expect that's what you will provide to us because your fiscal 20 isn't even completed yet. So yes, it depends where your fiscal year ends. Yes. There's another question here. I think I'll take this one. It's a question around a small arts organization applying as a festival. Thank you for that question, because while 95% of our applicants will be submitting a data arts report, there are two small exceptions to that. And one of them is for festival applicants who are applying who are not arts and cultural focused organizations. So if you are a festival lead producer applying in that category, you can instead submit to us audited financial statements that are signed by your board treasurer to provide a financial snapshot of your organization. The other exception to this data arts requirement is for our small, new, emerging arts organizations who have operating budgets below $20,000. Similarly, such organizations can instead submit a signed set of financial statements by their board treasurer.
Yes.
One additional question, Brenda. Here's an organization who has been leading community-based Native American events under their business. They recently created an extension project and received 501c3 status. Would they be able to utilize the business's financial information if they just established 501c3 nonprofit status?
Well, it ties into other application questions, because if this project has been done before outside of being a 501, I don't know that that goes together. So the application itself should let us know the project which has been done before for which you're now requesting DCA funding, in addition to at least 1 year of data arts reporting, depending on the size of the organization as well. I can't really answer the question specifically without more information.
Right. I think the things to call out with this question is, number one, do you have at least a year's worth of metrics to report on the specific project activities you're reporting on? If so, you can proceed to the next question, whether or not you have 501c3 status to be eligible to apply. If that's a yes as well, please proceed to do so. Absent 2 years of full data arts reporting, the only potential category you can apply for is our emerging category. If you're a 501c3 nonprofit with fewer than 2 years of reporting data to provide, with a project with at least a year of metrics and story that you can share.
I thought the question, though, was about a festival.
This one's regarding Native American events, community events.
Okay.
I'm assuming over the traditional folk arts category.
Okay.
In cultural history. Those seem to be the questions for now, Brenda.
Great. So we know that the 2 exceptions to cultural data would be in the emerging and the festival categories. All other applicants should pay special attention to their reports.
That's right.
All right. So now that you've done your data arts, we can calculate your maximum allowable request. The way Department of Cultural Affairs does this is by budget size. I'll go over these very quickly. Extra large budget would be 10 million or more. Large budget organization, annual operating of 800,000. Mid-size organizations are those with an operating budget greater than 75,000 in the most recently completed fiscal year. Small organizations have an operating budget between 10 and 100,000 in their most recently completed fiscal year. Emerging arts organizations are those with an operating budget of less than 20,000 in their most recently completed fiscal year. So emerging organizations, the maximum they can request is $3,000. I'm sorry, I skipped festivals. Outdoor festival parades applicants must have a minimum operating budget of $20,000 a year. The maximum ask in outdoor festivals is $20,000. The maximum emerging arts organization ask is $3,000. For small organizations, the maximum request is $10,000 or $20,000 of the recently completed fiscal. Mid-size is 10% maximum ask or up to a maximum of $40,000. Large budget has different qualifications, different percentages. Please look at this instruction very carefully on our website. And extra large are always in contact with the grant director before applying. Do we have any questions on this? There's not a percentile, but there's also a cap for each category.
That's right. I'll add a little bit to this slide. We often get the question, oh, shouldn't I just request for my maximum allowable? Try to avoid that instant temptation. A good way we recommend folks to approach this is first think about what our average grants wind up being. If our small grants, for example, if you're in a small organization category, tend to average around $5,000. If you're in the mid-size category, those grants tend to range more in the $10,000 range. So what's a good exercise to do is you take that average grant amount. Let's say the average grant's $10,000. You double it for a project of at least $20,000 because you have to match our grant at least 1-to-1. Think about what you can reasonably produce with that size budget. So if my budget's $20,000, I can pitch maybe three after-school student matinees of a new concert I'm producing in the fall. And if you feel like it's a right-size project, try to scale up from there. What if I double my grant request to $20,000, if I'm eligible for it, for a project at least double that, $40,000? Can I then produce realistically 6 low-cost student matinees? So that's the exercise you should follow to see if you can realistically scale your project to that size grant. So rather than just jumping straight at your maximum grant request. We have a couple of questions, Brenda.
Okay, Ben, before we take the questions, I'd like to add on to just what you said.
Sure.
The slide we're on is called Maximum Allowable Requests. If it doesn't fit with your project budget, don't ask. If your project budget is $20,000 and you're allowed to ask for 40, don't ask for 40. Your project budget must be in line with what you're asking for. So while these are the maximum allowable, your project budget your project budget is your true ask. You should not request more than 50% of your project budget as your DCA grant.
Okay. One question is, our request amount would be similar in either the small or emerging category. Is there a benefit to applying in one over the other?
You can do the calculation. I mean, the emerging has a cap of 3,000. The small has a cap of 10,000 or 20%. So you'll see some overlap in emerging, small, and mid. We leave that up to the applicant to decide which category benefits them the most.
Yeah. One of the things we ask our panels in the review process, when scoring organizations, we ask them to think about their peers operating budget-wise. So it's a question of how do you want to present yourself to the peer panel? Are you a smaller fish in a big pond or a big fish in a smaller pond? We defer to you in how you want to represent yourself.
Yes.
There's a question here, Brenda, regarding matching.
Okay.
The question is, if we receive $30,000 for a project and we've already raised $30,000 in the year 2020, can we use those funds to quote unquote match the DCA funds?
I'll give a qualified yes. I don't know when you say you've raised them, how much is in kind, how much is the board, how much is ticket sales. So your match must be 1-to-1, and your match can be no more than 50% in kind.
It depends on the internal accounting, perhaps, on when that applies to those funds you're referencing. When you're preparing a project budget for us, you're forecasting activities, again, taking place in the year 21 into the year 2022. We're asking you to present to us the cost of producing a project in that calendar time frame and the associated revenues to make it happen. So if you are presenting a story where funds raised in the last few months can be somehow applied in that future year, make sure that comes out in your proposal.
Yes. You'll see in the budget when Ben goes over that specifically in the application where you would put that matching information.
That's right. We have a question here regarding the cost per head ratio. To determine the cost per head ratio for an arts education program, do we just use the number of youth served, or do we also include audience members or the public performance?
I'll let you take that one, Ben.
Sure. With cost per head ratios, we ask you to consider all your project engagers. That includes the youth participants who are participating in the multi-week experience, plus the audience members. So it's particularly important in situations where you're really providing a really deep learning experience for a very small group of folks. So it can be quote unquote expensive when you divide the cost of your project by that handful of youth. So in those instances, it's important to market the heck out of your culminating presentation just so you can get your cost per head ratio right-sized. And regarding cost per head ratio, since you brought it up, thank you for the question. Across the board in our portfolio, our cost per head ratio generally ranges around $20. So if you're proposing a project where your cost per head ratio is higher than that, that's when you really need to be able to justify it with a compelling story. Festivals, I'm dropping in for a 2-hour event in my favorite neighborhood in LA, get some popcorn, listen to some musical acts. Cost per head ratio in that project when you have thousands of people engaging in a similar experience like that, maybe like $2 or $3. Contrast that with a really in-depth experience where teaching artists are going into like a senior home, teaching folks how to do arts and crafts, make basket weaving, painting, sculpture. It's going to be much more expensive. It may range as high as $100, but there's a story to tell about that. There's a difference between the transformative experience going from week 1 of such a workshop experience to the culminating presentation versus a one-day stop-in festival. So we defer to you to tell us what the right cost per head ratio is for your project and provide the justification if necessary.
Yes, for all cost per heads, high, middle, and low.
Yeah. One additional question here regarding emerging versus small. There appear to only be a few emerging arts organizations that can be funded through the program. Are there more funds available for small organizations compared to emerging?
That's hard to say because every year we have different applications. So I wouldn't say that one is easier than the other or more available than the other.
That's right.
It depends on the applicant pool we receive.
Right. The resulting grants they are a factor of how much, number one, how much municipal funding the city of Los Angeles has for the municipal budget year of 21-22, number of quality proposals received, the number of those proposals deemed fundable by the peer panel review. The way government grants work, at least with us in the city of LA, is that if you are deemed a fundable score by the panel, you will get a portion of your grant request. And so that portion is determined by how much funding is available and how many other fundable proposals there are that we have to fund.
Yes. Yeah, that ties back to DCA is never more than 50% of your budget. That's why it's a matching grant. And understand that municipal funding is almost never 100% of the ask.
That's right. One more question, Brenda.
Okay.
Can we include anticipated online audiences in our cost per head calculation?
Depends on the project you're proposing. You know, if you're proposing something that's hybrid that does take place online, yes. If you're proposing an in-person event, but you want to assume you're going to go online, that's different.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later regarding online audiences. General response will be probably yes, you can count them. If you're able to track some meaningful metrics, you can report back to the city. It's important to us that if you're going to broadcast to an online audience, it not be an anonymous audience. We have to have some understanding of where those folks live. Are they in the city? Maybe some information on their demography. You need to be able to have some metrics to report back to the city. It helps us paint a story to bring back to City Hall to justify the impact of our grant program and to support this program in future years.
Yes, and I will just add that if this project is intended to be online, you should already have that worked out and let us know how you're going to collect those metrics in the proposal.
That's right.
And one last thing I'll say on this allowable request page, please keep in mind your annual budget. Your annual budget, let's say, is $50,000. Please don't propose a $50,000 project knowing that it's only 25 and that 25 is the match. Unless this is the only project you do, please be mindful of keeping everything scalable within your organization and that we are funding one project of what your organization does all year. So please keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the Cultural Grant Program application itself. In our webpage, dcaredesign.org, you'll see the Cultural Grants Program page, and you'll see the Applying drop-down under the green arrow here. Each drop-down on this page has a volume of information beneficial to you to read before applying. By being here at this webinar today, you've really showed us that you're really determined to have a good application. And I would just like to point out that further information can be found on the website on this page. Do we have any questions, Ben?
Not at the moment.
I'm going to move on then because I want to make sure we have time for your whole application. So this is the timeline we're working on right now for the 2021-22 cycle. Step 1, you're here now. It's going to be to register and log into your SurveyMonkey account. Step 2, by August 31st, you're going to fill out and submit the online SurveyMonkey Apply application for the Cultural Grant Program. This also means that all the supplemental, the artistic samples, your data arts reports will be completed by August 31st and submitted with the application. Step 3, you're going to get a confirmation email. You're going to print out a hard copy of the application. You're going to have your board members sign the certification form, and you're going to mail the packet to the DCA office. It just needs to be postmarked by September 4th. Digital signatures on the confirmation and certification form are acceptable this year. So if your board member is unavailable, please know a digital signature is just fine. Step 4, where you're going to wait and hear back from City Council to approve the budget next year. Once the budget is approved in the May-June timeframe, we're going to send out award notifications. Step 5, you will take a contract. You will have a contracting session, and you will begin your projects to take place during July 1st and June 30 of 2022. Any questions?
Yep, let's go.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to turn this over to Ben, and I am going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thanks, Brenda.
Thank you, Ben.
Second here. Okay. All right, once you've gone through those detailed program guidelines on the website, it's going to point you ultimately to our SurveyMonkey Apply application platform. found at dca-la.smapply.org. This will be the very first screen you'll see. It's a nice landing page of our available offerings. At the moment, it's just our cultural grant program. If you've never used SurveyMonkey Apply before, the first thing you're going to want to do is register. It's the green button up here. Important when applying to this program is that you set your account up, first, last, email, password. Set yourself up as an organization, as this grant program is open to organizations only. If you've applied with us in the past, your Fluid Review login credential should work. So you can simply just click on login and enter your email and password associated with your account. If you've forgotten it, do use the forgot password tool. We've had some clients find some success with that. Once you log in, you'll first see that you have no application set up. But also important to know that SurveyMonkey Applies allows you to maintain certain identities, so to speak. You could be an individual, or you can represent one or more organizations. So when you first land into your organization page, you're not going to find any applications here. So you're going to click on Programs, and you're going to see our available grant program, cultural grant program. Click on More, and when you click on the Apply button, that creates a brand new application that you'll be working on. The very first thing it's going to ask you is to name your application. We ask you to name it after your organization name. And once you enter that, you'll take you to your landing page for your grant application, the taskbar. So I have one application pending we can work on and look at together. When you start a new application, this is what you'll see. Think of this as your checklist of things to do to submit an application to DCA. Your application will consist of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 components. The first one being the proposal itself, which will be the majority of your application. This is where you're going to talk about your project narrative and budget. And everything else is a supplementary item to that proposal. SurveyMonkey Apply keeps track of these various tasks using these handy icons. Things that you've already completed will be marked by a green check mark. Things you haven't started will have this grayed out circle. Things that are in process that you've started but haven't completed have this half moon icon. I can't submit anything until every item is a green check mark. So let's start from the very top with the grant proposal. In the grant proposal itself, it consists of 3 quote-unquote pages. The first one is some basic information about your organization and your project. Second portion will be the narrative responses, and then the third one will be the budget. So let's take a look at this first page. But before we do, I always recommend folks to get a preview of what these questions are in advance so you know what lies ahead. That gives you an opportunity to prepare your responses, particularly the narrative responses in advance, on a separate document, like a Microsoft Word document. And you want to do that because that way you can take advantage of the various copy editing tools that you'll find in that, like your spell check, grammar check, importantly as well as your word count and word and character count tools that you can find in Microsoft Word, because the narrative responses, as we'll see shortly, have character and word limitations. Very important that you stay within those constraints. It's a common pitfall that we see, I think, too commonly. Folks taking content from their Microsoft Word document, copy-pasting it into SurveyMonkey Apply, not realizing the platform is truncating their responses. So you're submitting a response that is not the full, complete story that you want to share. So don't fall in that camp. All right, let's jump right in. Very first thing is your official legal IRS name. Something we're asking folks to do differently this year is to enter it all in caps, otherwise matching the way it appears in your 501c3 letter. As it turns out, it's easier for us. We avoid some weird formatting issues as we have your content talk to our city budgeting process. And then basic contact information for your organization, including physical address, different mailing address if applicable. Main contact for us, this will be the person that we're going to reach out to with anything related to your grant proposal. These last 3 fields are optional for the purpose of the application. A DUNS number, Dun Bradstreet number, is a federal identifier used by the US government if you're conducting business with them. You may have that if you've received a federal grant in the past. The City of LA BAVN, Business Assistance Virtual Network, and City of LA BTRC, Business Tax Registration Certificates, are 2 separate accounts administered by the city's Office of Finance that they maintain for any organization, business entity that conducts business with the city. If you've received city grants in the past, you probably have those. If you have it, please provide it. It's helpful for us. If you don't, do know it's not needed at this moment, but will be required down the road if you get approved for a grant. Next question is a budget size category radio button. Tell us which category that you want to compete in. As we went over that slide, Brenda went over, there's some overlap in between some of these categories. We defer to you to tell us how you want to represent yourselves and which kind of budget group you wish to compete in. Second question is regarding discipline. These are the various artistic disciplines you can apply in. The asterisks mark the categories that are quote-unquote on cycle in this even-numbered calendar year we're in. So as we discussed earlier, all the performing arts art forms are on cycle: music, theater, dance, multidisciplinary arts. Everything else is allowable this cycle, but will be considered an off-cycle application. Next question is top line numbers regarding your organization budget and budget request. I'd like to jump to this first question first. This maps directly to the annual revenue less in kind figure that's outlined in your most recent fiscal year on your data arts report. So from this number, I can calculate my maximum grant request and to ensure that it matches with my budget. So if I'm a mid-sized organization, I'm allowed to request up to 10% of my recently completed year. So I'm going to request in this instance my maximum, $10,000 of my $100,000 budget. Next question, primary use of civic funding. So essentially your project category. As Brenda mentioned earlier, the vast majority of our projects are going to fall in this very first one, artistic project. This is when your artists, your creative workers are being compensated for carrying out the work that reflects their training in the arts. Presentations, low-cost activities, concerts, dance performances, etc. Arts education projects are those multi-week residencies that take place oftentimes during the school day. Rigorous, age-appropriate, standards-aligned scope and sequence around arts education for youth that culminates in at least one public event after school or in the weekends. Business education advocacy for the arts project is one where you gather artists, not so much for them to perform their craft, but rather to engage them in learning and experience and networking opportunities where artists are interacting with their colleagues and peers. The outdoor festival parade category is specifically one where this is an experience or event that takes place in an outdoor city street or corridor, like a public park, plaza, set of sidewalks, adjacent streets, specifically over one day, over one weekend. Next item up is the impact of your project. We're asking you to just check off the top 2 items of these 4 choices that you feel most apply to your project. Helps us categorize your work. Is it more about community dialogue, back and forth between artists on the stage and talkbacks with their audience, peer-to-peer learning, or is it about lifelong learning, which applies to a lot of arts education projects? Cultural arts jobs, is your project really about stimulating LA's creative economy and our creative workforce? Or is it really about producing these free and low-cost events and activities families, individuals, general public can enjoy throughout our city? Tell us which 2 most apply to your project. Question G, this might be the one we had a question earlier on the question G in the application. Question G is asking you to tell us which council district, if you're in the city of LA, or which other part of the LA County your organization is headquartered in. If your organization is based in the city of LA, your address will fall into one of 15 council districts. If you're located elsewhere in the county, you can check off this last box and enter the name of your city, Santa Monica, Pasadena, for example, Beverly Hills, or an unincorporated part of LA County, Altadena, for example. If you don't know your council district, we recommend you use LA City's Neighborhood Info app. You can look at that together. It looks like this. You can punch in an address. For example, let's punch in DCA's address here, 201 North Figueroa. If the address falls within the municipal boundaries of Los Angeles, you will be presented with a bevy of information. And the one we're interested in is this one, City Council. And you can see that DCA's office is based in Council District 14. If your address is not in the city of LA, that same tool will yield a nothing found result, in which case you're probably somewhere else in LA County. And so this box would be what is what you'd want to check off. Brenda, did you have a question?
We had a festival question.
Okay.
And a couple other host venue cost per head questions.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in a second. We're about to approach that question. All right, so whereas question G asks where your organization is based, question H asks where your services will take place. And so for question H, you have 15 options here. And those correspond directly to the City of LA's 15 council districts.
Sorry, but we got a question G narrative question.
Oh, okay, so we'll get to that in the next page.
Okay.
All right, so location of services is where your project's activities are going to take place. As we mentioned earlier, we're asking folks to think optimistically. We can all safely gather again and engage in the arts in the way we've known to engage with the arts in years past. So think about where your project is going to be. Have your conversations with your potential venues and locations now. We're alleviating some of the burden on the application by not asking you to get signed host venue forms from those potential locations, venues. Rather, have those conversations now, and we ask that you check off the boxes that you will, in good faith, pursue delivering your services in if approved for a grant. Because the boxes you check off here will be the ones that the panel will assume your services will apply in if approved for funding, and it will be scored accordingly. Avoid the temptation to simply check off the boxes that we noted are high priority areas for us. Do so if you feel like you will definitely be able to. You have very high confidence in delivering services that are approved for a grant. A note regarding online virtual activities here, a quick radio button asking if you plan on including that in your project proposal, where we remind folks that it's totally okay to include projects that feature online virtual activities for an online audience, but also important that it cannot simply be an anonymous audience. Can't simply publish a YouTube link for the world to see and count that and count the hundreds of thousands viewing if you're unable to tell a story back to DCA after a project is done around something about those folks. It's important for us that the projects that you're proposing, if including an online virtual experience, have some sort of mechanism for audience feedback, so you know how your programming is received, and some sort of means to collect some metrics to report back to DCA. Zip codes, for example, where folks reside, age, socioeconomic stats, things like that. So our intent with reminding folks about this is that don't just broadcast a YouTube link. How about sending in asking folks to fill out a quick, RSVP form where they give you their contact information, the zip code, before they get that. That way you can follow up with a survey afterwards to collect more meaningful information. Take advantage of online platforms like Eventbrite, paper bag tickets, even for free events, so that you have some means of collecting information about your proposed audience. Next question on this page is start and end dates. As we mentioned earlier, everything has to happen with somewhere in between this 12-month span of July 1, 21, June 30, 22. But most projects will fall in a much smaller window than that. For example, if you're just a festival, you're going to be probably one weekend out of those 12 months. Give us the specific dates you plan your project to take place. I'll flag for this question. There were we've had some folks who had some difficulty with this because SurveyMonkey is very persnickety about the format it's entered in. Make sure your format takes the form of month, day, year, 4-digit year. Okay, proposed impact of your services. So number one, tell us about the number of direct project participants. So this will include your creative staff, teaching artists, artists that you're contracting, artists that are their personnel or staff in your presentations, as well as direct project engagers. For example, if the arts education example, this would include the students who are participating, and then the audience members to be your wider audience for like the public culminating event, online viewership that you're able to track. These numbers are important because these two numbers together form the denominator in the cost per head ratio. All right, last question on this first page are your special constituencies. Tell us about up to 5 groups that you actively pursue and proactively provide services for in your work. Don't simply check off the ones that you know all enjoy the benefits of your service. Tell us about up to 5 that you are proactively targeting. It's important that you're thoughtful about which ones you're checking off, because there's a narrative question that maps directly back to this in the next page, asking about what specifically your organization does to maximize impact and outreach to these groups. Tell us up to 5 of them. With that, we can go to the next page of the proposal. This is when we get into the narrative portions of the proposal. You'll note in this section there are a few questions that are marked by the sunburst. The sunburst questions relate to questions used by a variety of funders here in the Southern California area. I know the County of Los Angeles, a number of small and large private philanthropic organizations use similar questions. The hope being that you may have some of these responses already prepared somewhere in your files if you've applied to other funders in our area. Hopefully that alleviates some of the administrative burden. The first one asks for your mission. Very important here that your response very clearly shows that you are a nonprofit organization with an arts or cultural services focused mission. The one exception being if you are a lead nonprofit who is requesting to be a lead in the production of an outdoor festival or parade. In that instance, we expect to see a mission statement that doesn't necessarily have to have an arts and cultural services focus. Everyone else, though, needs to be a nonprofit with an arts and cultural focus. Make sure that is clear in your response here. The history and programming question asks for a brief overview of your organization's past and recent accomplishments. It's a 3,000 character limit, so invest this in recent accomplishments, programming-wise, I would say in the last 2 to 3 years. We have lots of applicants who have storied histories in our city spanning decades. Focus primarily on recent accomplishments in the 2-3 year span.
Ben, we have an audience question.
Okay.
Do you count the audience to include the online audience? So how do you answer that question?
Yeah, the answer is generally yes, if you can capture meaningful metrics about that online audience. So if you're able to send out, let's take the example I mentioned earlier, if you have an Eventbrite and it's an RSVP opportunity to watch a live stream concert performance. If you're able to collect their information so you can report back to us about those folks who watched the online presentation, absolutely you can count that audience in your audience number. Sharing a YouTube link via posting it on the website and not being able to tell us who clicked on the link, I would shy away from including that potential audience estimate if you're not able to tell us more about it. So the answer is yes, if you're able to tell us and if you're able to provide information about the audience. Anonymous online audience is what we won't want to see you include in that number.
Okay.
The planning and leadership question is asking for specific action steps that your organization wants to take for the near future. Think about this as it's asking you to share where do you see your organization artistically, administratively, and financially in the next few years or so. Particularly important as well, given the various challenges and disruptions we've all been facing because of COVID. Your goal in this response is to show the panel that you're a strong organization, you have an action plan in place to address the challenges of the moment, and that your organization has momentum and is positioned to be successful in the near future. Community core audience is that question I mentioned earlier that maps back directly to the special constituencies that you checked off in the first page. So here, tell us about your audience, especially as it relates to the special constituencies. Tell us about where they are on the map. Tell us about where they are socioeconomically. Tell us about their age, etc. Tell us about how your programming ensures that your organization and offerings are important and relevant to this group or these various groups. The artistic policy asks you to share with the panel how artistic decisions are made in your organization. Does it sit in with one creative director? Is it more of a peer panel process? A panel process? Is there an opportunity for public engagement input? Tell us what that looks like. And importantly, what is your organization's policy and process and approach for compensating artists? Okay, with those out of the way, we can jump into the heart and soul of your proposal, the project narrative. This is where you give us the full details about the specific project you have in mind. Very first one is question F, the project description. Think of this as the technical specifications of your project. So this is a time to put on your journalistic hat and focus on using expository language to give us concise, clear details about the project you're proposing. This is where you're going to use language like, we are requesting DCA funding to produce and present 3 student matinees of a new theatrical production planned in the March-April 2021 timeframe. Project will take place in such and such theater in South Los Angeles. Will involve X number of teaching artists and creatives team and so forth and so forth. When you use language like that, it's very clear, quantifiable. It lends your project being interpreted as something that can be scalable. As something we referenced earlier is that very uncommon for folks to receive their full grant requests. So it's important for our panel to understand that, let's say you were requesting $50,000 but are only approved for $15,000. Can this project still carry on in a way that can be successful? And one of the ways to demonstrate that is to present a scalable project that would still be feasible, even if the outputs are reduced.
Ben, I have one more online audience question.
Sure.
What about sharing a unique Venmo password to a specific group, like a school? Venmo will show them the link of how many people clicked on that unique link, so they'll know that those views were all from that school. Is that specific enough for your online metric?
I'm assuming they're saying Vimeo, because we don't want to be charging Venmo fees for our participating youth necessarily. That could be a way to track, certainly. If you're using tools like both Vimeo and YouTube, they have pretty great analytical tools that are open to the account holders. So to the extent that you can tell us that the folks viewing your presentation are the students participating in your program in the school, that's definitely viewership we would want to count and able to count. But our hope is that, especially with online presentations, you could later expand it to include an even wider audience that you can also track information on. For example, can you use similar tools, either Vimeo, YouTube, what have you, to track similar information about general public viewership? If so, those would be great numbers to include in your online viewership numbers as well.
Thanks, Ben.
Sure. Back to project description. One additional thing I'd like to highlight here is this is an opportunity to showcase how a city investment can make your project bigger, faster, and stronger. And the other challenge here as well, relating back to the added challenge of showing that your project kind of lends itself to being easily transitioned to an online experience if needed. This could be a good opportunity to showcase how your project has a backup plan, just in case physical gatherings can't happen the way we hope they can be in 2 years. One last thing I'll add about the project description. As savvy applicants and excellent grant writers, you'll find an opportunity here to highlight the various overlaps between your organization's mission, the goals of your program, and DCA's funding priorities. As we mentioned earlier, and always worth repeating, we like funding artists, we like funding marketing efforts to ensure maximum enrollment, as well as project and program monitoring and evaluation efforts. So find a way to illustrate that overlap, and that will only strengthen your proposal. Next question on this page is question G. So this is where we had, I think, an inquiry earlier around question G. It's a 4-part question. So we're asking for a description of what impact and that your program has done, has achieved in the past. This is why it's especially important that you're proposing to us a project for which you have a track record. That way you can paint a compelling story of how, let's say, an arts education project transformed a kid who didn't know how to dance, barely got up, at week 1 of this workshop residency, but then by week 10 was up there dancing in front of his friends with all the confidence that you could possibly imagine. That kind of outcome. You can talk about the incredible high attendance that you've achieved at this festival that's only been getting bigger and bigger every year, and a new investment is needed to increase capacity even further. So talk about the metrics. Number two, talk about how you can adjust that based on how it will be improved upon based on the city investment. Number three, we're asking our folks to also think about their work through a social equity lens, and to the extent possible, tell us about what kind of social change your project is intending to achieve with its programming. Talk about what that looks like for the community you serve, as well as, if it applies, to what extent does your workforce kind of reflect the various social, gender, racial equity that your programs are trying to engender. Tell us that story with that third item. And finally, importantly, is the cost per head ratio. In that example I brought up about a young student who's learned how to dance and has built up confidence that he's never had before, we would totally see a cost per head ratio there far exceeding $20, and you have a story there to share. Versus, let's say, a variety of like temporary art installations along a median in a motorway, where passersby, motorists can see a piece of art for a split second and then drive away. You may have an audience number in the thousands, tens of thousands, and have a cost per head ratio that may go below $1. That makes sense also. So this is where you're going to want to tell a story and justify a cost per head, and to show that it's right size for your project. All right, moving along. If my page will scroll, hold on. Might be a small technical difficulty here. Okay. Next question after that is an opportunity to tell us about your various key staff and artists involved in your project. Brenda mentioned earlier, don't be shy about boasting about the terrific talent on hand at your organization and the various talent that you're going to recruit for the success of your project. Our panelists love to see this section filled out in a detailed fashion. Include your lead administrative staff, your creative force directors, your teaching artists, your education managers, your curators. Give us a little bit about them. Panelists wants to see that. Panelists enjoy seeing that. Especially if you have a project that involves a variety of artists. Festivals, for example, often showcase impressive rosters of talent, local and beyond. Something I'll note, it's very difficult, understood, as we ask you to forecast activities almost 2 years out, to not have that roster locked in yet. Don't use that as an excuse not to share information here. Another reason why it's great to have a track record with your project, you can showcase and boast about the talent that you had in the most recent iteration of your project. Tell us about the artists you most recently were able to recruit for your event. That way you're still conveying a sense to the panel of the caliber and the caliber of the talent your project is able to recruit and present to the public. On this form, it starts off by allowing you to share up to 5, but you have an option to provide even more and up to 10. In the rare case you have more than 10 folks to boast about, you can reach out to us via email. We'll find a way for you to incorporate it, because as we mentioned earlier, this section is very important. All right, so that's page quote unquote 2 of the proposal. The next page focuses on the dollars and cents of your project. So what we're asking for here is a project budget. And remember, something to emphasize, we are a project funder, not a program funder. The numbers you're entering here are specifically for the project you're proposing to us. So if it is for 3 student matinee performances of a new theatrical production, we want to see the costs and revenues for those 3 performances. We took the liberty of offering a very robust template here with various budget lines, reflecting the likely budget lines we see for a variety of projects across our portfolio. Obviously fill out only the ones that apply to your project. I've highlighted a couple items here, not in my example, but yours will be much more detailed than mine. One thing I'd like to emphasize is that every budget line is accompanied by a budget notes field. The strongest proposals year after year take advantage of this field. Avoid the temptation of just entering a dollar number here and moving on. This context here is super important. Yes, Brenda?
I'd like to cycle back a little bit. We have a question about someone's project performers that change from year to year that tend to be youth and young adults. Could they talk about this year's performers as sort of a typical performer, though they may not necessarily return in 2021?
Okay. Thank you for the question, because that reminds me of an important detail, that section highlighting key staff and artists is primarily around professional artists, adult artists. We understand the variety of our projects involve youth performers, student performers. Those are not the ones you're going to want to highlight in that section. We're interested in learning more about the teaching artists who are shepherding those youngsters in their art making and art learning experience. While youth and student artists are part of many of our successful projects, think of that section prior to focus primarily on the adult professionals who would be compensated as part of your work.
Ben, the person asking about the answer to question G was kicked off the internet and so did not get to see your answer to it. So if we have time, we'll go back to it. Otherwise, the recording will be posted on the website very soon. You can check for it there. You can also email grants.dca@lacity.org, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm going to put that into the chat for everyone to copy our email. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Brenda. So as I mentioned earlier, take advantage of the budget notes when entering your budget figures. Something as simple as I'm entering $2,000 in planned ticket sales revenue. Something as simple as saying 200 tickets at $10 per ticket goes a long way in showing the panel that you thought about this number. Something else I'd like to highlight on this page, very important, because it's the revenue side of your project budget, that it includes the very grant request that you're preparing this application for. Don't fall for that application pitfall of forgetting to include this, because you will have submitted a project budget that excludes any grant funding from the City of LA. So make sure this number matches that first number that you entered in the first page, and you mark it as a DCA Cultural Grant Program request. All right, so here in my simplified example here, I have $25,000 in total project income. Therefore, I should expect to see a project expense of exactly $25,000. On this page, you want your revenues and expenses to equal exactly. You don't ever want to show a peer panel that your project has a deficit or that it has a surplus. You want to show an exact expense revenue match here. So on the proposal expense side, similarly, utilize the budget notes section to add some context on how you're calculating individual budget lines, as well as this is a good opportunity to show the panel that you're aware of DCA funding priorities, and you can indicate on this side, on this portion of your budget, like this is where you plan to direct your DCA grant requests. So this instance, I plan to direct my entire $10,000 grant request toward my artisan performance. That's helpful for the panel to know that you're thinking about where you're going to redirect a DCA grant, or where to direct a DCA grant. You'll also notice on the expense side, there are some things here that DCA funds cannot be used for at all. For example, catering and hospitality, travel and per diem, insurance. These are lodging and meals. These are things that DCA grants cannot be used for. However, we recognize these are oftentimes important elements and expenses towards successful projects. So do fill them in if it applies to your project. For example, here's $500 towards travel and meals for my visiting artists. But it's helpful, competitive proposals will do this. They'll note that this will be covered by my matching sources. That way the panel is aware that the panel knows that you're aware that DCA grant funds can't be used toward it. All right, and here's in my simplified sample, I have $25,000 in expenses. I have an exact one-to-one match. And this is also a point where the system calculates for you. It divides your total expenses by the number of people you outlined on that very first page of the proposal, and to get the cost per head. So here it's telling me I have a project that's around $23. That's kind of like, as I said, average across our portfolio. When you have a cost per head ratio exceeding that, that's when it's very important that you have a compelling story to share in that question G that we talked about, your measurable impacts. Okay, with that completes the proposal in your application. I'm going to mark that as complete. The good news is every other component of the application will not take that long. That's by far the longest, most involved element of your application. All the other components are important also, but will hopefully not take as long. Next item up is our Data Arts Funder Report. So for that, let's take a quick look, and it's helpful to do an overview of how you get to it. We alluded to the SMU website earlier, but here's what it looks like. When you go to culturaldata.org, again, not a DCA website, this is housed at Southern Methodist University. You're going to your Data Arts account, and to get into your organization's own account, you go to the website first, of course, click on Login. Here, you'll enter your login credentials, your email and password. Once you log in using that information, it will take you to your organization's landing page. We're assuming that you've already you've done the heavy lifting of entering your cultural data report and data for the most recent fiscal year. So at that point, you're ready to generate DCA's customized funder report. And to find that, you click on the Funder Reports button up there in the menu bar. Easiest way to find this is to type in a couple of keywords, cultural affairs, for example, and then you click on Find, and then we should pop up. I think we're there. We're the second folks down there. Once you see us listed, you can click on View. If you've generated a report for us in the past, you can click on the View Report button. If you haven't generated this most current report yet, you're going to want to click on the Generate Report button. So click on the one that applies. Before it produces the report, it's going to ask you just to verify if this is the report you want for the City of LA, and it's going to include these 3 most recent fiscal years. So you can see ours in this example is outdated. This suggests to me that because my latest number here is 2018, I probably need to do my 2019 numbers at the very least. But if those 3 years are what you're expecting, click on the green link and it will produce a PDF report. And you know you've arrived at the correct report because you will see DCA's green logo in the upper right-hand corner of it. It will be this report you're going to save as a PDF document on your computer somewhere. And once it's saved in your computer, you can go back to the application. You can go back to your application and upload it as the second item in your application submission. You can see I've already uploaded a file, so it's marked as a green check mark. Okay, if you are an emerging arts organization, I'll add one additional note here, or a festival applicant who does not have a data arts report, you are 2 exceptions to this rule. And in lieu of a data arts report, you can upload a set of financial documents, financial statements, and recent expenditures and revenues signed by your board treasurer, and upload that as your quote-unquote data arts funder report, and that will be totally fine. Either way, if there are huge variances or notable variances, and we define that as 25% differences in your 3 years that you're reporting back to us in your revenues, expenses, or audience, other key elements, you have an optional opportunity to upload a financial snapshot and a brief narrative explanation that you can provide for the peer panel to explain those variances. Okay, next item up is an IRS designation letter. If you've applied for grants in the past, you probably have this sitting somewhere in your files or in your computer. Just upload a PDF scan of the letter you received from the IRS, showing your organization status as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Next item up is an important one. It's the list of the board of directors for your organization. We ask that you utilize this Excel worksheet as a template. We can take a peek at what that looks like. 1 second. There it is. It's pre-filled with the 4 of the basic roles. I believe the state of California requires at the very least the president, secretary, and treasurer. Do take the time to fill this out in good detail. Our panelists love looking at this list. They want to see, great diversity and representation to ensure independent governance, and great set of skills and expertise that they can lend to you, that's lent to your organization to ensure your organization's success. So do take time to fill this out in good detail.
I have a question about that. Would you like us to list previous board of directors who may cycle back into the board in the future? I think this list should be current board of directors. What do you say, Ben?
I agree. It should be the current board membership at the time of application. There is a section in the narrative responses of the proposal, however, when you talk about the history of your organization, you can talk about, or when you're talking about leadership, the leadership question, you can allude to some of those specific members who come in and out and lend their expertise when appropriate to let the panel know that you have this kind of like a dynamic roster. But for this response, we're interested in understanding the current board membership.
Great, Ben, thanks.
And mark that as complete. All right, artistic work samples. This is the section of your proposal that our panelists look forward to because they've spent hours upon hours of looking at words on this and text on a screen or on paper. They need a break, and this is a year where we're going to have a large cadre of performing arts organizations apply. So it's a great opportunity for you to showcase some fantastic video artistic samples of your project in recent years. So a very important section. This can really go a long way in wowing a peer panel. For your artistic documentation, you can submit this information two ways. You can submit either 3 links to online videos, audio tracks, web pages, dynamic online content. If you do that route, you can provide 3 links, or up to 10 still images of high-resolution images of your work. As I mentioned earlier, as performing arts organizations mostly, we hope you take advantage of sharing videos. Videos go a long way and are highly, highly valued by our peer panel. When selecting videos to showcase, it's important to think about showing video that provides a pretty good representation of what your project would be like if you're there to experience it in person. Avoid the temptation to upload a prepared like marketing, splashy, highly edited video, talking heads with lots of cuts to activities talking. It's more about trying to replicate what the project feels like and is like if they're to be experienced in person. So some of the best videos that we've seen in terms of its effect on the panel showcase, just real time. I have a camera. I'm at a concert. I have footage of the terrific artistic merit on display. I have a sense of a highly engaged audience. That goes a long way in wowing and dazzling our peer panel. So I encourage that route. It's always a good recommendation to include great video. If you're going to go the video route, you can provide up to 3 links. Click on the links button. Click on the next button. Add your URL. Also, something worth calling out here, when adding links to videos, make sure there's no passwords. You want to make it so that the panelists can simply click on the link you've given them, and they'll see exactly what it is that you want them to see. In the event that you're uploading video that's particularly long, you may want to include a time marker where they ought to start and stop. Do know that we ask our panelists to spend up to 5 minutes on the work samples during their adjudication of your proposal. So keep that in mind as you select the videos to upload. Make sure they get right at the content you really want them to see.
Ben, I have a question here. Can they upload 9 images in 1 audio file?
No, the way the application is set up, you have to go one route or the other. However, if an audio file is an important element of your submission, definitely don't go the links route. The 10 still images route. Go the links route. There's ways to include still images via links. For example, you can provide a link to a URL or like a tailor-made slideshow of specific images you want the panelists to see. And then your second link could be the audio SoundCloud link that you want them to click on and listen to. Anytime your planned artistic samples includes any kind of multimedia, I think that's a good sign that the still images is not the route to go. Find a way to utilize the links, whether or not it's providing a direct link to a website, a Google Drive folder where there's a series of still images that you want them to see. That's a way to do that. Knowing, of course, that they're not going to spend more than 5 minutes on your artistic samples.
If we link to a slideshow, I'm guessing we should still stick to 10 still images. Thank you. Got it.
Not necessarily. It depends. If it's a slideshow that what if it's a website? What if it's a static website that has more than 10 images? I can see a panelist looking at that and getting a sense of the content you want them to see. The 10 still images is a limitation if you're going to go the route of providing 10 high resolution images that you want panelists to see and no video at all. So don't limit yourself if you're going to go the links route to this 10 limit construct. Limit yourself instead to knowing that the panelists will not spend more than around 5 minutes.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay. All right. Supplemental items, another super important part of your application. So this is an opportunity for you to introduce some outside voices, testimonials, reviews, critical assessments of your work that art is not your own. So these are not you've spent an entire big chunk of your proposal towards you articulating how wonderful your project and your organization is. This is your chance to introduce other voices for the panel to appreciate. So this is a great place to include letters of support, testimonials of project participants in the past whose lives have been transformed, letters of recommendation from collaborating agencies and project partners, critical reviews that have been published in magazines and newspapers. You're allowed to provide up to 4 of these supplemental items. Take advantage of all 4 of those supplemental items. The one restriction here is if you're an arts education applicant, one of your 4 supplemental items must be a curriculum with 2 sample lesson plans. So in that one attachment, it's a good idea to combine those components into a single PDF file so that the panel can click on that knowing that they're going to see a curriculum accompanied by a couple of sample lesson plans.
Mm-hmm.
Great, so I'm going to upload a sample project so I can mark this as completed. I only uploaded 1, but make sure you upload 4. Take advantage of each one of those upload opportunities. Home stretch, folks, we are almost done. The last couple of items are these completed estimated service metrics form. Tell us about some various numbers related to the audience and community you serve, as well as your workforce. So we're interested in some reach, marketing numbers, and some workforce numbers that relate to your organization. The process evaluation form is the very last thing you'll do. It's just a quick feedback opportunity for Brenda and myself. Tell us about what your experience was like with the cultural grant program and things that we can improve on in future cycles, and things that you were impressed with. Praise is always welcome, as well as critical feedback. And with that last check mark, this button has now become green, and I can click on it and submit. But before doing it, I always remind folks, take the opportunity to click up on preview to see what your application looks like. Do the last couple of checks to make sure your proposal looks as good as it possibly can. Check for typos. Make sure there is no accidentally truncated narrative responses. Make sure this grant request here of 10,000 shows up in my budget down the road here in my government city budget revenue source. Those little things add up and goes a long way in showcasing your organization's administrative capacity and presenting itself well, and conveys a sense to the panel that you got your stuff in order, that you can pull off a great project and have it be successful. And plus, you're not going to be doing your application 2 hours before the application deadline, right? So you'll have lots of time to review this, double check it, and triple check it before you click on the green submit button. And once you do that, that will officially submit the electronic portion of your application. You will receive an automatically generated email from us, and that will give you instructions on how to mail to us the text portion of your proposal, and that will complete your application submission to the Cultural Grant Program. All right, with that, I will open the floor to some last-minute questions. I know we're over. I appreciate folks for sticking around. We went a little over because there was lots of great questions shared with us. We were happy to answer that. So let's address some more. There's a question about follow-up phone calls early next week. Absolutely, we welcome it.
Yes.
It is, of course, the week leading into the deadline, so we anticipate a busy week. So appreciate your patience as we get back to you. But we will certainly be happy to answer your questions as they come.
Yes, and you can always email us.
Yeah, I'll type that in right now as well. Okay.
All right, well, if there are no further questions, we thank you all for your time and really look forward to getting your proposals. Feel free to reach out as you go along the application if you come up with any other questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, on behalf of DCA. We appreciate your time tonight, this afternoon, and your mental energy towards this process.
Yes.
Look forward to your proposals.
Thanks so much.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Happy weekend.